time no see, I'm not attending anymore the startup events. That's why I'm wearing like this. I'm so sorry for this, like a corporate guy, because I'm gonna go consulting after here, so that's why I wear it like this.
Okay.
This is a typical right one.
You're forgiven.
Yeah, thank you. So after Teams, you know, the show, it's gonna be challenging for us to talk with Adora, but she's doing lots of things, so I guess it's gonna be easier for us. So first, I'm gonna start with your personal things, okay?
Yeah.
You were a product manager, then you were a co-founder, then you were a partner of to the YC. So just give us some opinion. Why did you do this career movements? How did you make it? How did you decide?
Yeah, so I didn't know anything about startups or the tech world. I was a computer science major, but I was mostly building desktop software, like Microsoft Word programs. And so I was actually in grad school getting my PhD in economics before I even discovered the world of startups. And then when a friend told me about them, I got obsessed. I stopped working on my research. My professors were like, are you going to ever do anything? And I decided academia was not for me. And then I started doing some research, and I figured the best thing for me to do if I wanted to start my own company was to go work at a really great startup. And so that's what I did. My first job was as a product manager. I learned how to build products. I learned how to do things like analytics, how to talk to users and get feedback. And I spent 2 years at a company called Slide. And then from there, that's when I decided to leave and start my own thing. And that's like the advice I give to most people. It's especially if you're in school or you're just leaving school and you want to do startup, but you don't have a really good idea yet that you're not obsessed with. Like, don't force yourself to doing a startup. Yeah. Go work at a startup, and you'll learn all the things that you shouldn't do basically at your own startup. And all the good things that you should do.
It's a good device, actually. I'm teaching in the university at the same time. So in this culture, people has a great egos. So everybody wants to do their own things.
Sure.
They don't want to be a part of any startup. So it's really good idea. I always recommending same thing.
Yeah.
First go to the startup, do some things with them.
Yeah.
Then try to, if you can't go to the startup, first go to corporate for 2-3 years.
Yeah.
Then spend their money, learn, then go your startup. Yeah, keep going to the co-founder side.
Oh, okay,
and also you are a good combination, like economics, then the computer science, so you are a good combination,
Yeah, it's a perfect upbringing. And then I started it with my brother. He had just graduated from school, and we just started working on things. We got into YC in 2010. And honestly, we didn't have much for the next 2.5, 3 years. We were just always pivoting, trying to find what to work on. And then one day, my brother came up with the idea of starting Homejoy, which became pretty big. And it was essentially, he was a pretty cheap guy, and he was trying to find a cleaner. He was having a hard time doing it, and he was wondering why. And then he looked more into it, and then we decided to build Homejoy, which ultimately became a platform for home services. And a lot of the focus was on being able to book a cleaner on demand.
So what happened?
Huh?
What happened to the startup?
So basically, we worked on it for 3 years. It got pretty big. We raised a lot of money. It didn't turn out the way I wanted it to turn out, quite honestly. We got acqui-hired into Google, who had happened to be starting home services team. So a lot of people went over there, and then that's it. Yeah.
So down the Y-Combinator.
Yes. Then I went on to. I actually spent a year in China, working with a lot of startups there.
Yeah.
So that was really fascinating to be in a new culture, new startup culture, frankly. And then after a year, I decided to come back, and then go back to Silicon Valley, and became a partner at YC. And so I've been there for the past 2 years.
Oh, okay, great. So you have an experience in China, you have an experience in the US. Also, there's India things. You visited India lots of times.
Yes.
So how many times did you come Turkey?
Turkey. This is my 3rd or 4th time.
All of them is about entrepreneurial?
All of them? İhsan. I've done some work with refugees, and so that's why I've been here too as well.
Oh, great. So after seeing these 3-4 countries, which is popular and important companies, so what do you think about the Turkish ecosystem, entrepreneurship ecosystem? What did you see?
Yeah, so it's really fascinating. It's very different from Silicon Valley, and maybe closer to what I've seen in India.
In which part?
In the sense that startups haven't been, the startup ecosystem is just like starting to build up, and hasn't been around for 50, 60 years like it has been in Silicon Valley. And so you'll see a lot of a lot of engineers are working on basic infrastructure things. And so things that aren't so popular in the US anymore for various reasons, like on-demand services, delivery things, stuff like that, is still popular here and still building. And also things like, you sort of skipped the whole, like people use mobile here more. There's just different ways of using various technologies. And so there's different types of startups to build, I guess.
So it's similar to the India, but like 10 years ago from to the US, you say?
Yeah, I would say, I think there's investors that are coming into the system, and there's not that many yet. And so there's a more maturation that needs to happen along those lines, investors, as well as startups as well. And so I think if you look back to where Silicon Valley was maybe 10 or 20 years ago, that's kind of like the work that's being done here now.
So what do you think about this ecosystem in Turkey? Actually, you say that we are 10 years back to the US, but if you're checking from the Startups Watch, is one of the database of the Turkish ecosystem.
Sure, yeah.
So it shows that in 2010, we have 12 organizations doing anything about the ecosystem. Right now, we have approximately more than 200 organizations, the angel networks, the VCs, the universities, accelerators, and other things. So it's getting fast, actually.
Yeah. By the way, yes.
This year, I'm trying to defend the country. No,
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say this backwards.
No, just I'm going to give one number. Yeah. This year, we're going to finish $150 million early stage investment in Turkey, which is small.
Yeah.
That's what.
Yeah, no, I think the thing that needs to happen that you're starting to see now, and like you're an example of this happening, is former founders exiting their companies, having good exits, and then putting their money back into the system.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, I guess that's what I was trying to say. That's what you're seeing sort of in India and China and here now as well. And so once you get that back in the system, I think founders naturally, former entrepreneurs naturally know how to deal with other founders that they're investing in and what they go through versus if it's just,
it's
real
a
estate agent.
great point, because in Turkish, rich people coming from the traditional businesses.
Right.
So we don't have lots of examples. They just change their mind to the invested startups.
Right.
Actually, Mehmet Bey is pushing them to do some investments in the startups, all traditional people, all businessmen. You are so right, because we don't have lots of rich people from the internet ecosystem or the new technology ecosystem.
Right.
That's why it's not, going back and other things. Great. So coming from this side to the ecosystem we are talking about, what do you think about the corporate's role in the ecosystem?
Corporations are great for founders, actually, because they have distribution they have access to all the customers, and they have a lot of money in R&D to spend. And so I think it's actually great if startups work with corporates as customers for buying their products and trying it out. I think the biggest frustration for founders when working with corporations or even government is the lack of transparency in how the procurement process works. And so I think if corporates, they can probably innovate a lot better by working with startups if they make that a more transparent thing, which is something that you're doing for corporates in Turkey and elsewhere. So that's great that that's happening. And it's great that you're a former founder too, because you understand how it all works.
In Turkey, it's getting popular. The corporates started to do something with the partnering with the startups, investing them, acquiring them, joint venture with them, to starting a new businesses.
Right.
So coming to the other part, in the Y-Combinator, it's still so popular. Everybody is doing lots of accelerators, all the countries, all the cities, but still, most reputable one is the Y-Combinator. Why?
That's a good question. I definitely think there was a first mover advantage. But two, I think the way we think about running YC is different maybe from other accelerators in the sense that we're founder first, meaning we make decisions and we help founders even if we lose a bunch of money from it. And what that has done is it's given us, which means if you do that, you have to have a really long-term play, a long-term vision, versus trying to make like an extra buck today or nickel and diming founders today. And so if you're founder first, meaning if you do what's good for the founder and not maybe what's good for you as an investor, then you build goodwill over time. And through goodwill, then great founders will come to you and hear about you and come to you. And so I'm pretty confident that's the number reason why we're there. And I do think that some accelerators do have too much of a short-term focus, and maybe that's because they have to make money for their LPs immediately. But we've been fortunate enough where we haven't had to make those trade-offs.
Yeah. Is Paul still in the game? What's he doing?
He's effectively retired. He's actually living in England right now, but he pops in once in a while.
So he did a good job about the structure of the Y-Combinator. After him, it's still going the same way.
Yes, yeah, it was him and the 3 other people for the longest time, and then he finally decided to hire more people in, and so that's worked out well.
Yeah. When I was talking with some of the entrepreneurs over here, they ask lots of questions about the Y-Combinator, how they measure the startups after they invested after the batch. Because it's so popular over here, they are saying lots of things. If you are not growing 200% per week, they will just fire you. They say, okay, I don't want to do anything with you anymore, some things like that. How do you measure the startups?
Measure the startup success.
Yes, success of the startups.
I mean, there are short-term metrics after they exit the program. You can look at how much money they raised and stuff like that, which is not highly correlated with ultimate success, but it's like a short-term feedback thing for us. And in the long term, we ask them to just send us updates once every month. And what we're looking for is your business model getting you closer to sustainability? As in, we have this thing called default alive or default dead. And so your default dead is if you continually burn at the monthly rate that you're currently burning, will you just be dead if you never raise money again in X number of months? And sort of the goal there for almost all companies is to get default live, as in to the point where you don't have to raise money again. So that's one way to measure it. I think there are many other ways to measure, but ultimately getting to profitability and
scalability.
And scale, is the big thing.
So what is the percentage of the companies applying to the Y-Combinator and accepting them, and then who is going to be alumni? What's the percentage?
Oh, that's a good question. It's very small.
I know that.
I actually don't know what the percentage is recently, but it's got to be lower single digits for sure, from applying to getting in.
So, maybe everybody knows, but I'm not sure. What are the biggest popular startups coming from there? Like the Dropbox and the Airbnb, what else?
Yeah, I just finished reading thousands of applications. I think the top 3. One is AI is still hot, which makes sense, especially AI in healthcare. So how do you take any specialty like dermatology or eye and detecting eye disease and stuff like that? So the use of the iPhone is really iPhone plus machine learning and being able to collect lots of data, you can probably almost effectively replace some specialists. And the topic of AI, since so many people are in the field now, there's lots of need for new tools for people working in AI. So I think the concept of like GitHub for machine learning, those sort of things for data scientists are becoming very popular in building those tools out. Blockchain is obviously very hot. Everyone's talking about it these days. I think there are a lot of bad use cases that are going on.
Which applications of the blockchain? It can be applied, smart contracts, and which one are you talking about mostly?
Frankly, a lot of people are just saying da-da-da-da-da and blockchain, which almost never makes sense. I think the use cases now, I think like crypto is really interesting, and working in that specific use case is actually interesting. And then also applying blockchain to maybe physical assets. But the other stuff, it's really hard to tell. In almost all cases that people are coming up with today, it just seems like you don't need it. It's just nice, and maybe you can fool some investors by adding blockchain on top of it, but not many.
Nice to have.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, great. So you say AI, healthcare, and blockchain.
AI, healthcare, blockchain, and then those are probably the top 2 things. I had a third one in my mind, but I forgot. if I come up with it.
Yeah, okay, no problem. So the time is passing. We have little time. So I'm going to ask the questions for what are your advices for the entrepreneurs, investors, And if you have any advice for the accelerators, you can say that, because we have lots of people from all the Middle East over here.
Yeah.
Most of them, of course, following to the US stuffs, but you can give maybe them a unique advice for themselves. First, you can start with entrepreneurs, then go investors, and whatever you want.
Okay, so for founders, my advice, my top 1 or 2 pieces of advice is always, 1, focus, start small. I think a lot of founders get into a bad habit of thinking like, in 10 years from now, it's going to be this, and then try to build everything at once. But really what you should do is small with the start beachhead, and focus on that and just have a strategy there. Another one is keeping your burn low. I think when you start raising, especially if you start raising money, a lot of people just decide to hire people and just throw people at problems, spend a lot of marketing and stuff like that. Don't do that. Have a strategy and keep your burn low, because there are a lot of things that go wrong in a startup, and you need to.
So when you're raising, you're saying, okay, which is important in Turkey, is raising a fund. It's a biggest issue, because from my approach, I know lots of investors, so they're always claiming about, we don't find the qualified entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
But other side, I saw lots of entrepreneurs, good engineers, they have good ideas, they can execute, but they can't explain, they can't pitch their ideas, they can't have any strategy for raising fund.
Yeah.
So just a little bit more explain that part, what do you recommend?
In terms of raising?
Raising, yeah.
Like how to go about raising?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, I saw a lot of pitches earlier. I think the biggest thing, if I had to break down of the best ways to format your pitch, for example, it would be have a really good 1-line description, 2 sentences most, and test it on hundreds of people and see if they actually get what you do. And take out all the jargon and buzzwords. That's the biggest thing, is including all that, because investors, maybe they'll understand it, but usually they don't. And so you just want to explain it like you're going to explain it to your mom. I think, like, in terms of format, it would be, what do you do? How does it work? Like, be able to explain that in 1 minute or less. Your current traction in terms of real revenues, or, CAC, LTV, these kind of things. Things that make an investor say, okay, if I give you $100, your company is going to make X number of dollars back. Like, that's I think the lever you need to show them. And then obviously, if you have a really good team, focus on that.
A good one. It's important for today's pitch also.
Yeah.
So what else do you recommend for the entrepreneurs? Last one.
Burn. Let's see. Burn, focus. Oh, making quick decisions. There's been lots of studies that show that low-performing CEOs, the reason why they're low-performing are usually along the lines of not focusing, not making decisions quick enough. And I think for founders, when you're really early, you need to do that. Which is not to say don't be thoughtful. It's, when you have all the information in front of you, make a decision and then move on. And it's better to make a quick decision, go after, and then find that it's wrong really quick than to spend months and months just waffling around.
Yeah, good one. So the investor part.
Yes. For investors, I think going back to the previous question of just, I think for investors, you need to recognize that you're going to lose money, and you should just think the first X number of investments, you're not going to make any money off of it, and go from the perspective of being founder friendly and making decisions that are good for the founder, because the goodwill will come back for sure. And I don't think you should go into investing if you think that you're going to make money off of even the first 10 investments you make, because if you do, then you're that's just short-term thinking, and that's not good service to the founders.
Good one.
Yeah.
Good one. Yeah.
And then for accelerators, I think it's the same. Accelerators are essentially investors at the end of the day, and the difference is that you spend X number of months with them. And so I think the biggest thing is to get out of the way of founders. I think some accelerators spend way too much time on programming. At YC, we barely do any programming at all. We actually just offer office hours when the founders need them, and then we do one thing a week, and that's it. We don't give them office space or anything like that. I think it's really important to let the founders focus on their startups and not force them to listen to speeches and stuff
Which is really important, because when I'm checking, Ozan mentioned that I have started almost the first accelerator in Turkey, and that part, all the startups asking me, so what's next? What I'm going to do right now?
Yeah.
So if you're an entrepreneur,
Yes.
you just ask me, give me this, and I will give you.
Yes.
I'm not going to create a structure like a corporate and you will
Yes.
work inside of that.
Yes. And I think you just, even if you do provide the programming, then that's nice, but don't like get on their case if they don't show up and things like that, because they're probably working on their startup, which is what you want them to do, because that's how you're going to make money anyway at the end of the day.
Yeah, which is great. So we have 3 more seconds, 2, 1, 0, done.
All right. Yes.
Yeah, we're on time. Okay. Thanks very much.
Yeah, it's a good job.